New name, same stuff. This is Dave at Curtis Crafts, and today I make a stick. Everything for this build besides the 3D printed parts came from Hobby Lobby and Tap Plastics, which are both local to me. I picked up the acrylic rod for about $20. It's 5 feet long, 1.25 inches thick, hollow, and pretty durable. The spray paints I picked up from Hobby Lobby. One of them is a green clear enamel, and the other is a frosted glass texture to go over the tube and break up some of the transparency. And one of the things I neglected to show in the video is that I modeled the entire finish while it was still wet with a piece of paper. These here are just some brown scraps of leather I had lying around from a separate project. I went ahead and cut them into an 1-inch wide piece, which I then wrapped for the 2 individual handles, which were equidistant from the ends on this rod. There's a bunch of different versions of this that I've seen online and in the game, and I wanted to really sell that this is not a double-bladed lightsaber, so I went with the double grip version. And adding the caps at the ends later also helped sell that this is not a Star Wars prop. Once I wrapped both grips with the leather, I also added another strip of 1-inch lighter, say tan leather, which helped add a little bit of detail. I was debating for a while what I was going to do with the switches and end caps and everything I needed to conceal in the ends. And I decided to 3D model the ends and end caps in Tinkercad and then print them out on my Ender 3. Then I sat and waited for about 4.5 hours till they were done. I printed these in Amazon Basics Premium PLA to help protect the ends from getting smashed up and to fill in some of the seam lines and print lines. I used XTC epoxy, which is a 2-to-1 mixture, 2-part, and painted it on with a foam brush. After 2 coats, it was good enough to move on. I mix in a bit of purple so that you can tell that you're not layering it on way too thick or that you have any runs. Basically, if the color is way too visible, you have a large glob of epoxy in one spot. After I layered the parts in 2 coats of epoxy, I left them to dry overnight. On the next day, I loaded some opaque black by Createx into my Iwata airbrush and laid out a base coat of black. After that, I layered on a bit of pearlized gold, also by Createx. I like these because they're already thinned out and ready to use in the airbrush, so it makes it real fast. For the lights, I used a 5-volt RGB light strip and set it to green. Once I trimmed them to length, I wrapped it in a plastic drop cloth that I picked up from the hardware store for a couple dollars. I wanted it to look wrinkly and kind of marbleized on the inside of the tube, which helped sell the effect of what it's actually supposed to look like. This wound up working incredibly well because I could twist up the entire assembly loaded inside the tube, and when I let go, the plastic unfolded against the edges while still remaining wrinkly. It also diffused the LEDs as much as I could hope for to get rid of some severe hot spots that would have been there otherwise. This was about my 4th attempt trying to load the assembly into the tube. Had I thought about this a little more, I would have left the other end cap off, threaded a rope or string through it, and used it to pull the entire assembly through, but after some trial and error, it eventually worked in my favor. Since this stick was going off to somebody else and not for me, I wanted to make sure the switch was easy enough to use for posing and for doing pictures. And I also wanted to make sure that the batteries could be easily swapped out without changing anything else or removing too much of the fixtures. For ease of use sake, I used a AAA assembly for a flashlight that holds 3 1.5 volt batteries in it, which is just enough to run the LED board. It's also super easy to change by just popping the end cap off of the side with the switch, pulling the batteries out, reinstalling, sticking the assembly back in, and putting the cap back on. I opted for a rocker switch so that you could turn it on, rotate the staff anywhere you want, flip it, pretend to hit people with it for pictures, and not have to worry about holding a button down or a momentary switch. Once the switch and electronics were loaded, I wrapped a little bit more leather around the ends to help hold the end caps and 3D printed parts on, as well as hide some of the wiring that was sticking out the bottom. For the last bit of detail, I made a black acrylic wash that's heavily watered down and coated all of the leather and the end caps with it. I was originally going to use a brush and try and get it down in, but the leather was absorbing it faster than I could brush it on, so I opted for a bit of sponge, dabbed it on, and wiped off any excess things that looked bad or too dark. I didn't want to paint the rocker switch for fear that it would get gummed up or not work correctly, so I carefully applied some super glue to the top of it and cut out a very small piece of tan leather and attached it to the top of the switch. After that, I verified that you could still remove the cap easily, which you can due to a recess which I designed into it. And you could still remove the battery pack, have the ability to change the batteries, and reinstall the assembly. That's basically it for the Jade stick. It's ready to go off to its new owner. No idea what this is actually called. Staff, maybe. Stick. It's a cool stick and it's not a lightsaber. That's all that matters. Lights up nice and easy. There's a bunch of different modes on these LED strings, but this one's kind of the coolest, so I'm going to leave it at that. Button right here on the back, easy off and on, and that wraps this one up.